Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6. Let's try that again. Okay, something happened here. Something's not right. Can you get me another one of these real quick? Something's not working here. So, all right, 2 Kings chapter 6. And we'll begin our reading at the 8th verse, 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 8. Trade out here. Put new batteries in this. Apologize. Okay, let's try that. It's a little bit better. All right, a little bit better there. 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 8 says, Then the king of Syria warred against Israel, and took counsel with his servants, saying, In such and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent unto the king of Israel, saying, Beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down. And the king of Israel sent to the place where the man of God told him, and warned him of, and saved himself there, not once nor twice. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing. And he called his servants and said unto them, Will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, None, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet that is in Israel telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. And he said, Go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host. They came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord, and said, Smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. Now, I call your attention particularly to the beginning of verse 17, where it says, And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. I want to talk to you this evening about opening our eyes. And the fact of the matter is, we all need that. We all need a spiritual awakening. We all need an opening of our eyes. And we need to pray that the unbelievers of our country and our world would open their eyes and see the truth of the gospel. And we need to pray that the believers in our country and our world would open their eyes and see that God is doing things even in these times. The servant of Elisha had no idea what the Lord was doing, but Elisha did, and he prayed that his servant's eyes might be open. Let's pray once again. Lord, thank you for your word. Pray that you'll speak to us through it tonight. Give us instruction, give us guidance, give us encouragement, give us hope. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. Blindness is a very difficult thing, I'm sure. I've not been blind. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but I'm not blind. But I've known those who were. And two of the hymns that we sang tonight, the last one we sang, He Hideth My Soul, and the first one we sang, Blessed Assurance, were both written by someone who was blind. And many, many great servants of God have been blind throughout the years. But there are times in our lives when perhaps we are not without physical sight, we can see, but we face a situation that seems like darkness, and we face a situation that seems hopeless. It might be a financial situation. It could be the betrayal of someone whom we've loved and trusted. It might be a great disappointment, something we have dreamed of and worked hard for, and discover that it's not going to happen. Or perhaps what we have built has been destroyed. Many this time are seeing businesses and things they've worked on for decades in big trouble because they can't do business. It might be a great rejection that brings us to darkness, or it might be a devastating illness. And at this time, many are ill, as you well know, not only with virus, but with other illnesses. You know, it's an interesting thing. Since the virus is sweeping the world, other illnesses haven't taken the time off. And people are suffering and ill. It may even be worse than that. It might be the loss of a loved one. It could be a physical attack. Just recently, I've heard not far from here of two physical attacks in people apparently in robberies, but the assailants not only robbed the person but attacked them. It could be an abusive home situation or abusive situation other places. We are facing things today that are out of our control. But the truth is, in life, we all face things that are beyond our control. Yet, as we shared last Sunday, the child of God is never truly alone, even when it feels like we're alone. Now, I want to look at the verses that we read a moment ago. I want to just work through them a little bit, and then I want to share some other scripture with you. We'll not be turning to the other verses. We'll go quickly through them. And I want to close with a couple of stories that I hope will be encouraging to you. 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 8 says, Then the king of Syria warred against Israel, and took counsel with his servants, saying, In such and such a place shall be my camp. He was getting ready to attack Israel. But in verse 9 it says, The man of God sent unto the king of Israel, saying, Beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down. They're laying there, they're waiting for you. They're ready to ambush, they're ready to attack. In verse 10, the king of Israel sent to the place where the man of God told him and warned him of, and saved himself there, not once nor twice. Therefore, the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing. He expected the king of Israel to come. He expected to launch his attack. He never came. His location was discovered. The trap he had laid was found out, and he never came. And so he concludes that they had a traitor in their midst. Again, verse 11, Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing, and he called his servants and said unto them, Will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Which one of us, which one of you, I'm sure he said to his men, is the traitor? There's a spy in our midst. There's somebody who's telling the king of Israel about our plans and what we're going to do. But in verse 12, one of his servants spoke up and said, None, my lord. There's no traitor here. We are all loyal to the king. But Elisha the prophet that is in the land telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. Now Elisha, one of the great prophets of all time, one of two men, as far as we know in the history of the world, who went into heaven without going through the gate of death, the other one being Enoch. And Elisha, the prophecy says, will come again. We're at the beginning of Passover week. And the truth of the matter is that in a traditional Passover Seder, an extra chair is set for Elisha. and a place setting set for Elisha. And at some point during the Seder, the father of the home will tell the youngest son to go and look out the door to see if Elisha is coming. Why? Because they expect Elisha to come. And I believe one day he will come. I think that's clear in the book of the Revelation. But Elisha here, great man of God, and the Lord is telling him about what the king of Syria is planning to do and what he is doing. And so the king of Syria sets out to get Elisha. In verse 13, and he said, "Go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about." This king is great for laying his traps and surrounding people. Verse 15, and when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots, and his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And understand, they were surrounded. Their circumstances were bleak, and it looked like there was no way out, no way to escape. This was common battle practice in that day for an army to lay siege on a city. You completely surround the city rather than storm the city. You surround the city and starve them into surrender. And so they had come around the city, no doubt hoping that Elisha would give himself up and surrender. His servant says, "What are we going to do? We're surrounded. There's no way out. There's no escape. There's no hope." In our day and time, it certainly could be that some people feel that way. It could be that some are feeling that there is no way out, no escape, and no hope. And so the servant says, "Alas, master, how shall we do? What are we going to do? Shall we give up? Shall we surrender? What will we do?" Notice the beginning of verse 16. And he, Elisha, answered, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." Now imagine about that time that servant looked around. He looked at Elisha and looked at himself and probably looked at the people in the city there and said, "Your math is different than mine." I've counted those fellows out there. There seems to be a lot more of them than there are of us. What's more, they've got armament and chariots. I don't think we've got much of a chance. How can you say they that are with us are more than they that be against us? Dr. Bob Jones Sr. was a great evangelist. What's interesting, I think, is that this story takes place in Dothan. Bob Jones Sr. was from Dothan, Alabama. And he was known for his great quotes. Bob Jones University published a long time ago a little booklet called Chapel Sayings by Bob Jones Sr. And one of those things that he often said was, "You and God make a majority." Another way of saying it, and we find this in the scripture, if God be for us, who can be against us? And I assure you, God is for you, and God is with you, and he's promised to be with you. But that servant can't see it. All he can see is his circumstances. All he can see is that he and Elisha and other people are there in the city of Dothan, and they're surrounded. The enemy is all around them, and there's no way out. And it doesn't record that he thought this, but it could be that the servant was thinking, Elisha, maybe you ought to turn yourself over to them. Save the rest of us. But if he thought that, he never got to say it. Verse 17, Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Now, the truth of the matter is, The Lord had his protection for his servant. Elisha's servant couldn't see, but Elisha prayed for him to see. I want to share with you some other scriptures that I hope will encourage you. You needn't try to turn to them, we'll go quickly. But Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 to 30, we read this, "And when Jesus departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come into the house," important statement, "the blind men came to him. And Jesus saith unto him, Believe ye that I am able to do this? And they said unto him, Yea, Lord." Isn't that wonderful? Do you believe I'm able to do this? He didn't even ask them what they wanted. He said, "Believe ye that I am able to do this?" They said unto him, "Yea, Lord." And it doesn't say that he touched them as he did other people on other occasions. It simply says, when he said, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" And they said they did. It says their eyes were open, and Jesus straightly charged them, "See that no man know it." Their sight was restored, and they were able to see. Now, I want you to know and understand what's happening here. Just at his word, he just spoke, and these men were able to see. Now, that's Matthew chapter 9. In Matthew chapter 20, there's a similar story, but it's not the same story. It's not the same event. While there are similarities, the details are different. In Matthew 20, verses 20 to 34 says, "And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, 2 men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou son of David." Well, these are 2 blind men, just like the other story, and they both say the same thing. Yes, they're both calling on him as the son of David. That means they're calling on him as their Messiah, as their Savior. And they call on him as Savior to save them. And they pray as the others, "Have mercy on us." But there's no mention here of them going into a house. And there's no mention of them coming to the Lord and he not touching them. Matter of fact, it's quite different. Let's start again. "And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, 2 blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou son of David. And the multitude rebuked them, because they should hold their peace." You know what they did? They said, "You guys be quiet. Don't bother the Lord. What are you crying at him for? Don't you know that he's come to speak to us? Don't you know he's come to share the word of God with us? Don't you know that he's the great Messiah? Why do you bother him?" And in essence, they're saying, "You're worthless. You're not worthy of his attention. You're not worthy of what he has to share with us." I'm sorry, folks. Oh, my goodness. Take that. Okay, thank you. Sometimes electronics are great and sometimes they're not. These men didn't sit there and shut up like the crowd wanted them to do. 2 blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard Jesus pass by, they cried out, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, son of David." The multitude rebuked them, because they should hold their peace. But they cried the more, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou son of David." When they were told to be quiet, they cried more to the Lord. You know, when we cry out to God, he listens. When we cry out to the Lord, he answers. And Jesus stood still and called them. And instead of saying, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" he said, "What will ye that I should do unto you? What is it that you want me to do?" Now, didn't he know what they wanted him to do? Of course he did, just like he did with the other men. But sometimes the Lord wants us to keep praying. They say unto him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. So Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. And immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. Again, while there's similarity in the two stories, they happen probably about 2 years apart. And the circumstances, the details of the story are different. But that's what Jesus came to do. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus comes to the synagogue. And it's the Sabbath day. It says he came as his custom was. And they gave him the scroll to stand up and read. And he stood there and was reading. And he came to the point that we would call Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 1. Now, there were no chapter and verse divisions in the scriptures at that time. But he came to that point we would identify as Isaiah 61:1. And he read this. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. Why did Jesus come? To preach the gospel to the poor. Blessed are the poor in spirit, he said. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted. And that might be somebody who's hearing this right now. They may be among the brokenhearted. He sent me to preach deliverance to the captives, those who are held captive. You say, you mean those in prison? Well, it certainly could mean that, but people are held captive by many different things. Some people are held captive by addiction. Some people are held captive by fear. Different things hold people captive in different ways. So he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind. Then he said to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Recovering of sight to the blind. Jesus came to open the eyes of the blind. Now, I just read to you two stories where he opened the eyes of those who were physically blind. But he also came to open the eyes of those who are spiritually blind. Blinded by Satan, blinded by the lies of this world. Sometimes even believers don't see what God is doing. In the story we read in 2 Kings 6, the servant did not know that the Lord had his own host, his own army surrounding them and protecting them. Elisha prayed that his eyes might be opened, and they were. You see, in verse 18 it says, and when they came down to him, the Syrians came. They were going to come and take Elisha. When they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now there's more to the story, but we're going to stop there. Listen to me. He prayed for the servant to have his eyes open, but he prayed for the Syrians to be blinded. Now their blindness was temporary. Eventually their eyes would be opened again as well. But what I want you to see is the people of this world are often blinded. The Lord closed their eyes while opening the servant's eyes. Elisha led them to Samaria, and then he prayed, open the eyes of these men. And the king said, shall I smite them? And he said, no, set bread and water before them, and sent them back home. The bands of Syria, it says, came no more. This is Palm Sunday, the day when we celebrate the beginning of the week that led up to the crucifixion. But 8 days from now, we'll be celebrating the resurrection. And when Jesus was crucified, the disciples must have felt like there was nothing but darkness around them. They had all their hope in him. They had given their hearts to him. They'd given their lives to him. They had left everything literally and followed him. And now the Romans had taken him and crucified him. Jesus was dead. What now? And they were in hiding, afraid that they were going to be the next ones. Many of them could not go back home. They'd given up their homes. They couldn't go back to what they had done before. Matthew, for example, could not have gone back to being a publican, and doubtless they wouldn't have taken him back. And so they were in darkness of despair. Now Jesus had told them that he would rise again, but right now they can't think about that. All they can think about is their current situation, their current circumstances. And folks, we can look at our current circumstance and say it's bad. And the disciples no doubt said, well, nothing like this did we ever expect, and nothing like this has ever happened before. And you know what? You and I can say that today. Nothing like this did we ever expect, and nothing like this has happened before. But here we are. I dare say our situation isn't as desperate as theirs, or as theirs seemed to be. But then came Sunday. And some of the women came to the disciples and said, the Lord is risen. We've seen him. Peter and John run to the tomb to see what's going on. They find it empty. They go back and join the others. And later that day, he appeared to two of the disciples on the way to Emmaus. In Luke 24, verses 30 and 31, it says, and it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave to them. They didn't recognize him. He walked with them on the way, and he said, what are you talking about? And they said, are you a stranger around here? Do you not know what's going on? I like what I heard Ravi Zacharias say about that. He said, they're asking him, don't you know what's going on around here? Ravi Zacharias said he was the only one who did know what was going on. And that is so true. But it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it and brake and gave to them, and their eyes were opened, and they knew him. Their eyes were opened. Now, they weren't physically blind, but they did not recognize the Lord, even when he was right there with them, walking with them and talking with them. We had sung last Sunday the song In the Garden, he walks with me and talks with me. Do you know sometimes the Lord is walking with us and we're not even aware of his presence? We don't even sense and realize that he's there. In John chapter 9, verses 14 to 32, Jesus opened the eyes of a man who had been born blind. And that man not only received his physical sight, but he put his faith and trust in the Lord as his Savior. Then in Acts chapter 9, Saul of Tarsus had been persecuting the people of God. And because of him, many had been locked up and some had died. He was on his way to Damascus with orders from the high priest to see if there were any others who were of that way. He was looking for believers in Jesus, followers of Jesus, and the Lord, the resurrected Savior, met him on the road to Damascus. And the glory of the resurrected Lord blinded Saul of Tarsus, and he fell to the ground. And he called out to him and said, who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. And Saul said, Lord, what would you have me to do? The Lord told him to go on into the city, into Damascus, and he would be told what to do. And he meets up with a man there who helps him and takes him in to baptize him. In Acts 9:18, it says, and immediately there fell from his eyes as it had been scales, and he received sight forthwith and arose and was baptized. When he trusted the Lord, when he saw the Lord's glory, he was blinded. But when he trusted the Lord and when he followed the Lord's word, and when he came to be baptized, his sight was given back to him. Later on, Acts 26:18, it said Jesus came to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me. Lord Jesus came to give sight to the blind, to open the eyes. 1944, the Allies invaded Europe, in essence to rescue Europe from Nazi Germany. Thousands and thousands of soldiers went to battle, and many, many from our country. I was telling somebody the other day, when I was a boy growing up, us boys, you never asked another boy, says, was your dad in the war? Never asked that question, because everybody's dad had been in the war. Question you asked was, what did your dad do in the war? That was the question we always asked. There was a young man from Colorado. His name was Billy Renstrom. Billy was sent to Europe and went with Patton's Third Army as they invaded Europe, not in the D-Day invasion. The Patton's army came up from the south, up through Italy. One day, about 2 years in, 2 years after he joined the army, not 2 years in Europe yet, still 1944, Billy came across a landmine. It exploded. He had injuries to his arms and legs. He had internal injuries. He had injuries to his face. And he lost one of his eyes and was blinded in the other eye. Obviously, he couldn't serve anymore. He was sent back home. Blind Billy Renstrom gave his heart to the Lord. And he went to Bible school and studied and eventually became a pastor and then an evangelist. And then it was discovered while he was in school that he had a great tenor singing voice. He could sing and he could play music. He met a lady and they married, and she traveled with him. And he came into contact with the noted evangelist Bill Rice, founder of the Bill Rice Ranch. For several years, Billy Renstrom traveled with Dr. Bill Rice and was his soloist in his evangelistic meetings. 1982, Billy Renstrom came to West Park Baptist Church. And he came with his wife, and he played an instrument that I've forgotten the name of it. It's an electronic instrument, and you don't touch it. You just move your hands over it and makes the sound, makes the music. And he sang beautifully. But something had happened to Billy a few years before that. In 1975, 31 years after that landmine had taken away his eyesight, a surgeon operated on his one remaining eye, and he could see again. He could see again. After 31 years of being blind, he could see. He came to our church and he told the story of how God had restored his sight. And the Lord used him greatly in his music and in his preaching. Many years before that, an Englishman named William Tyndale wanted to give the people of England the Bible in their own language. The truth of the matter is, and this seems so strange to us today, but in that day, in the 1500s, it was illegal to have the Bible in England in the English language. That seems so absurd to us today, but it was the case. So 1524, William Tyndale left England and moved to Germany. There he became a friend of Martin Luther, obviously during the time of what's now called the Protestant Reformation. William Tyndale translated the New Testament into English. He was opposed by King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII sought after William Tyndale. He sent people to Europe to buy up all the copies of the Tyndale New Testament. First, Tyndale thought this was horrible, and then a friend of his said, no, take the money and use it to print more. And that's exactly what he did. He relocated to Belgium, and there he began working on the Old Testament. He had translated the Pentateuch and the book of Jonah. But in 1535, in Belgium, William Tyndale was arrested. In August of 1536, he was convicted of heresy. What was his crime? He said he wanted every English plowboy to be able to read God's word. That was his crime. He wanted people to have God's word in their own language that they could read and understand. In August, he was convicted of heresy. In October, he was burned at the stake. And they say, as William Tyndale was being burned at the stake, that he cried out and prayed, "O Lord, open the King of England's eyes." He wanted the King of England to see the truth and know that the British people, the English people, needed God's word in their own language. Now, William Tyndale died 75 years later. His work was used with the authority of the King of England to translate the Bible that we now call the King James Bible. They took Tyndale's translation and other works and put it together as the greatest scholars ever assembled in the history of language studies. And they produced the Bible that we can now have in a language that we can read and understand. But Tyndale's prayer was answered. Lord, open the eyes of the King of England. It wasn't King Henry VIII. It was much later. The eyes of the King of England were open. I'm saying tonight that when we're surrounded, when the situation seems hopeless, when darkness seems to be all around us and there doesn't seem to be a way out and there doesn't seem to be any hope and it seems like it's never going to end, we may not see the horses. We may not see the fire, but we still have the promises of God. And we need to know and understand that the Lord knows things that we don't. And the Lord is doing things that quite often we can't see. We need to pray earnestly, again, that the unbelievers' eyes would be open to see the truth of the gospel and be saved. We need to pray that the believers of our country's eyes would be open to the things of God. And we need to pray that our own eyes would be open so that He can bring us through in ways that we cannot even imagine. And let God show us that which we cannot see. Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. Let's pray. Father,